Shënderuar, mirë se erdhët në përballjen e telegrafi.com. Unë jam Muhamet Hajrullahu. Sot kemi nderin që të realizojmë një intervistë së bashku me profesorin e nderuar Richard Capllan, profesor universitar nga Oxfordi. Welcome, Mr. Capllan.
Thank you.
Capllan.
Pleasure to be here.
Do you believe there is going to be a final agreement between two countries, between Kosovo and Serbia?
Well, there are already, of course, agreements, partial agreements between Serbia and Kosovo. The 2013 Brussels Agreement, the 2020 Washington Agreement, which the Trump presidency helped to facilitate. The difficulty is that the provisions of these agreements have only been partially implemented. But for there to be what you call a final agreement, I think would require a mutual recognition of Serbia and Kosovo. And I cannot predict whether or when there might be such an agreement.
There are a lot of pressure in both sides for this final agreement. Do you believe that Kosovo and Serbia, not yet this year, but maybe next year? Well,
it is very possible. It is very possible, but as I know, as a political scientist, one cannot predict the future. Look at how many times it appeared that peace between Israel and Palestinians was within reach, and then it disappeared. We've come very close in many conflicts to reaching an agreement only for that agreement to float away. But I do believe that there is a lot of interest on both parties to normalize relations. I believe that there's a lot of pressure on Serbia and Kosovo to reach an agreement, but it is still conceivable that they will withstand those pressures and that the agreement will not be reached. I like to think that it will be, but I honestly cannot tell you when that might occur.
if not when, how do you see the final agreement? Because there are a lot of discussion in the process with the Serb Association for Serb Community in Kosovo, having Kosovo a seat in UN. How do you see this?
Well, as I said, I think that the fundamental issue will be mutual recognition. Serbia will have to acknowledge the sovereign independence of Kosovo, the territorial integrity of Kosovo. That can be achieved with border adjustments. That's not out of the question. And similarly, and this will be a lot easier, of course, Kosovo will have to acknowledge the sovereignty of Serbia within its borders. And that will have all kinds of implications. It will mean that Kosovo can join the United Nations. It has already joined regional and international organizations, but only when Serbia has not been in a position, or Serbia's allies have not been in a position, to block its membership. There are a lot of other things that need to be done along the way, perhaps to make it possible for Serbia to recognize Kosovo. And one of these, you mentioned the Association of Serb Municipalities. Yes, I think that that is an issue that will not go away. And I think that it is important for Kosovo to recognize that its Serbian minority feels vulnerable, feels anxious within Kosovo, and that an association will help to reassure it, as well as other measures which are very common throughout Europe to protect national minorities.
You said we don't know when, but you mentioned, for example, Israel and Palestine. It was example also with the Greece and North Macedonia. It's more than 20 years that the war in Kosovo was finished, and more than 10 years we are talking with Serbia, but we don't have yet that kind of final agreement. Having in mind the situation, security situation in Europe, invasion from Russia in Ukraine, and the war in Ukraine, and the tensions in the Western Balkan countries, do you think that those kind of events in Ukraine will potentially have any kind of tensions and trouble in Western Balkan countries?
Well, I think they're already having an effect. For one thing, I think there is a general anxiety, and it's not limited to the Western Balkans. It's not limited to Kosovo, but throughout Europe, there is anxiety as a consequence of this war. Will war come to our borders? What if there is a detonation of a nuclear weapon? That will have wide-reaching consequences. So yes, there's already concern, and it's, as I said, shared outside the region as well. But we already see, even before the war in Ukraine, that Russia has been involving itself increasingly in the region in ways which, frankly, are not particularly constructive. They're not constructive in terms of European integration. Russia has been promoting separatism. Russia has been promoting fragmentation. In Bosnia and Herzegovina, it has been supporting Belgrade in its positions against the European Union, encouraging them, and not just the political leadership, but also business leaders, also civil society to some extent. So I think that the Russian factor is already with us. I don't think that it's looming on the horizon. I think it is already an actual factor.
How the region, the Western Balkan countries, must go forward, because a lot of tension will more come if the situation is like in Ukraine, and of course Russia wants to have that.
Yeah, I'm not worried that war will actually come to our doorsteps in this region. I'm not worried about that. I mean, we are a long way from the region. There are many NATO countries between this region and Ukraine, so I don't worry so much about the extension. I worry, it's more like, if you will, a fire that has sparks that fly, and those sparks can ignite tensions elsewhere in the region. That's one thing that I worry about. But if I can put a positive side to this, that is that this is a concern that's shared within Europe, that's shared by the United States, and I think that that's one reason why you're seeing stepped up efforts to bring this conflict to an end. In other words, there is a recognition on the part of European leaders and the Biden administration that it is important not to ignore the situation in the region and to perhaps redouble efforts. And you've seen, I think, a much more visible presence of envoys and diplomats in the region over the last year, and I think that's a good thing.
My last question regarding this, how do you see the future of Western Balkan countries and the security situation in the region regarding to those what happened to Ukraine?
Well, again, depends on your time horizon. But ultimately, I see the entire region inside the European Union. At what point? I wouldn't be able to tell you exactly, but I do think that the European perspective is a real perspective. The problem has been that the European Union has not been a credible actor in communicating this. And it's not just about, there's no reason not to grant visa liberalization. And it is a mystery to many people, myself included, why that process has not gone forward. I think that's a very small thing for European states to do. It would be a very important thing.
And a positive one for
a positive one, yeah.
Mr. Capllan, Professor Capllan, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.